just click that.
Here it is.
There it is. Yeah, so tonight, Minnie Bruce Pratt will read from selected poetry and prose and talk about queer life, queer love, and fighting for solidarity and liberation against an oppressive system. Minnie Bruce is a writer and activist and has written 10 books of poetry and creative nonfiction. They include Crime Against Nature, which was chosen for Le Monde Poetry Selection of the Academy of American Poets, the American Library Association Gay and Lesbian Book Award for Literature, and as a New York Times notable book. With poets Christos and Audre Lorde, who received the Lillian Hellman Dashiell Hammett Award for the Fund for Free Expression for writers who have been victimized by political persecution as targets of right-wing and fundamentalist forces. She received a Lambda Audre Lorde Award for her lesbian poetry for Inside the Money Machine. With activists Barbara Smith and Ellie Bulkin, she co-authored Yours in Struggle, 3 feminist perspectives on anti-Semitism and racism. And Minnie Bruce Pratt is also a managing editor of the Workers' World newspaper and is joining us from, I think you're in New York today and not in Alabama, is that right?
Yeah, I'm in Syracuse, actually. Yeah, so I'm pretty far north of New York City, actually, at this moment.
Cool. Well, we're absolutely thrilled to have you. And now I'm just going to give it over to Jara for a second.
Yes, hi, very warm welcome from you too and all the rest of us. We are so happy to see you again. And first of all, how are you today? And how common is it for you to be invited to a conference like this one, focusing on Leslie's work?
Well, actually, not all that common. Interestingly enough, yeah. When I had a conversation with the organizers of you all's conference, I said that my agreement with Leslie was that I wouldn't talk about her personal life in any kind of detail, but that that some of the things that I had written in the past involved her in a kind of an oblique way, and I actually allude to that moment, that conversation that we had, which was in the first year of our getting to know each other. So there was a little period of, I don't know what to call it exactly. After she died, there was a little flurry of people asking me to come and talk about Leslie. And I just said, I can't do that, blah, blah, blah. This was my understanding with Leslie. And then I didn't get any more of those requests from people. And then I got requests to speak as myself, just that, right?
And also what we're going to do today, talk about your texts. So we talked about Leslie and Leslie's work all day, so now we are focusing on your
Yes, well, and we're focusing on I'm focusing on the pieces of my writing that overlap with Leslie's issues.
Yes, so you're going to start reading and we'll have a discussion afterwards, right? So you're not gonna, well, if you want to break in between and have a discussion in between, just let us know. But I think how we decided to do it last time when we prepared was that you're going to read first and then we talk afterwards.
Yeah, that sounds fine. All right. So this is the moment. This is the original Crime Against Nature. I think you can see that, which was published in 1989, I think. No, yes. Oh, wrong. Sorry. Here we go. Here we go. So people always say, how do you pronounce that? And I say,
How do you pronounce it?
You say it any way you want to. I usually say Z, maybe, right? But it's meant to be provocative, right? So this was published in 1993. And my goodness. Which one? 68. All right, here we go. So this is just a year after Leslie and I got together. It was the fall after she and I got together. And the very opening paragraph addresses the whole issue about, do I ask permission? Do I not ask permission? You know, what do I do? So this piece is called Palace. At almost sunset in the formal garden, we walk on plush green grass between borders of perennials. I've been telling you a story about Radcliffe Hall, who, like you, led a life across between sex and gender. But unlike you, she was a wealthy woman when she dressed in men's clothes and was called John by those who loved her most. When she wanted to write a novel of sexual inversion, she consulted Una, Lady Trowbridge, her wife, her lover of many years. She thought the book might bring catastrophe not just to her career, but to their lives. Una replied, "Write what is in your heart. I wish to be known for what I am, and to dwell with you in the palace of truth." And then later in the piece, I say, as we reach the grape arbor's leafy corridor, you suddenly kneel in front of me and kiss my hands. At the edge of the emerald lawn, other visitors stare at the extravagant gesture while I shift between unease and delight. You say, "I'm telling you now, whatever you write of me or other, you will never have to ask if I approve. The only place I want to live with you is in the palace of truth." And then at the end of her life, and I mean really at the end of her life, 2014, she said to me, smiling puckishly the way she does, right? But what I really meant was in the house of truth, because in fact, she went somewhere in New York City and had some baker person make her a little gingerbread house, tiny little gingerbread house. It was not a palace. It was not a palace by any means. So let me say something here about pronouns. We used she and her pronouns with each other as appropriate with lesbian relationships. And you'll hear those pronouns in the pieces from C. Pronouns are determined by social interactions, by respect, by love. But those two situations are not always in sync. Leslie preferred to use the pronouns she and Z of herself, but she also said, "I care which pronoun is used. but people have been respectful to me using the wrong pronoun and disrespectful using the right pronoun. So it is about what the person knows of you, and it's how they're trying to indicate respect to you. And this is another piece from C. It's called Tattoos. And it's so funny. I thought I was super organized. Here we go, page 157. So I thought I was so organized about what I was reading. So here we go, 157. As we push the cart toward the supermarket, the livery people just outside the automatic door hustle us for business. The only African-American woman looks at your stone butch and my denim femme, then politely asks without missing a beat, "Ladies, do you need a ride after you finish?" When we check out, the white cashier calls you sir. In the shopping center shoe store, when I sit down to try on sandals, an African-American woman in the next chair nudges me, smiles, points to you and says, "Better have her hang on to your purse while you do that. It might walk out of here." When we return from the city at 2 a.m. in formal gown and suit and tie, we decide to get breakfast at the Freeway Diner. Our waiter is a street-worn white guy in his 60s. We praise his tattoos as he takes our order. After we finish eating, he carefully waits until the two policemen drink their coffee and leave. Then, smiling graciously, he offers, "Ladies, please come back again." In my classroom, a Puerto Rican student listens patiently as 5 white dykes argue about the night before, the 2 women they saw dancing at the bar, African American and Latina. The one who was leading, how could she be a butch? Too fluid, too expressive. The Puerto Rican finally interrupts and interprets for them. The woman was leading with exuberant Latino hip-hop, a young male style adapted into Latino butch expression. She smiles, says, "Yes, of course you saw how hotly one woman followed the other, but you just didn't know how to see the place they were dancing inside." Now, I don't know how much you all have been talking about this, but I know you know about it because, U.S. news dominates the news stream. So you have either talked about or heard of the fact that the U.S. is in the middle of a strong turn to the right, at least by some of the people who are backing the Republican Party. And that seems to be clustered, not surprisingly, in the southern states of the old Confederacy, plus a few more, like West Virginia and maybe Idaho. Poor Idaho. So what I wanted to do is read to you from this book. See if I can get the cover in focus. These are my co-authors at the bottom. And this is called, let's see, well, it's called Years in Struggle. I don't know if you can read that. And it came out in 1984. 1984. I didn't meet Leslie until 1992. So when I met Leslie, she said, I know you're not an anti-communist because I've read what you've written. She meant this essay. So that gives you a window into our relationship. Okay. So white women are offered some false gains to keep us from making that choice to stand with women different from ourselves. One choice is that of a material security equal to the men of our culture if we side with them as we move outside the home into the larger world. We are offered not the nightmare image of the slaughtered woman, but the image that, as a girl, I saw flashed on the screen in a darkened theater. A beautiful young white woman, blonde, skinny, is weeping because her past affluence is gone, her plantations and her slaves. Her family is without food, the garden trampled, but she digs her hand into the red clay and vows, I'm never going to be hungry again. As God is my witness, I'm never going to be hungry again. She goes on to become financially secure, using white men for protection when necessary, using her, quote, connections to make sure she lets nothing go to others during the social revolution of emancipation and Reconstruction. When I was a child, Scarlett was a heroine in her strength as a woman within the myth of my land as I had learned it under segregation. Today, she is to me a person ready to take what is offered to her as a woman who is white, a lady of the culture, with no caring about where the land came from and who has worked it, in order to secure a narrow place of safety that she foolishly thinks is secure, the place of equality with white men. That this is foolish security is evidenced by the number of women in poverty in the US. This is in 1984. White as well as women of color, a number increasing every year. Anne Braden points out that historically the struggle for economic and social justice for the most disadvantaged group, Blacks in slavery, substantially benefited all other folk who were not in control of land and money. She likens this to a shift in the foundation stone of a house that causes all else to move. Now, actually, that's not Anne Braden. That was the Combahee River Collective statement that Barbara Smith was part of. The real gain in our material security as white women would come most surely if we did not limit our economic struggle to salaries of equal or comparable worth to white men in the US. But if we expanded this struggle to a restructuring of this country's economy so that we do not live off the lives and work of third world women. A second false gain that we, if we are privileged women, are being offered now, and I was speaking now in 1984, but we're still being offered it. This time, not just in our sacred homes, but the protection of us living in the US from the, quote, powers of evil in the rest of the world. The foreign policy of the Reagan administration, so this was during the Reagan administration, is being shaped by evangelical Christian beliefs that hold the US has a divine calling to, quote, protect the free world, unquote, from godless evil, quote, perverted communism. Christian evangelical theology believes that the forces of good must win such a battle in order to bring the second coming of Christ, the destruction of the present world, and the creation of a new heaven and earth. Well, there are, I used to, after I became involved in 2001 with Workers' World Party, I tried to explain this phenomena to people in the party. And up north, the people were just like, how can they believe that kind of stuff? How is it possible to believe that? And I just said, well, that's called idealism versus materialism. And we're on the materialist side. And we have to figure out how to explain to them what it means to be a materialist. This is where all the legislation is coming from around no critical race theory in the high schools right now. Critical race theory. When I talked to one of my friends recently about that move, she said, oh yeah, it's not critical race theory in the South, it's family history. Because if you're teaching this to any children in the South, they're going to say, what was my daddy doing? What was my grandfather doing? What were my uncles doing? And my aunts, what were my aunts doing? In other words, this is not about some strange force out there disembodied. This is about their families. And I just went through it with somebody in my family. We were talking about my grandpa Pratt. That's a very complicated story. And she had told me this good anecdote about him walking out on the Klan when it came to his church. This was in like 1915, right? But there's more, you know, there's more to that story. He believed in segregation, or he was living under segregation. Anyway, the questions would be, what was Papa Pratt doing? And, you know, there are those pictures from the trial of Emmett Till's murderers where the white guys are all sitting in the front of the courtroom laughing. And they were acquitted. They were acquitted. And that was, you know, not 1915. It was not 1915. So there's, you know, there are hundreds and hundreds of these bills being introduced into the state legislatures. Some of them are getting voted down. Some of them are getting through because they're Republican legislators, you know, like I think it's in Montana where there's one trans legislator, and she said to the people in the chamber, if you vote for this bill, then you're going to have the blood of these people on your hands. And later she said, I was not being hyperbolic. She said, I was not being hyperbolic. I have a friend who killed herself or himself because one of these bills got passed. She says, I was not being hyperbolic. Now, how to get people to understand that this legislative push that they see as a political game or ploy of some sort is actually going to kill people, and not just the critical race theory, but other, other issues as well. Denying people the right of access to abortion. Anyway, this is a timely issue and it keeps coming up over and over again. There was, what happened with Emmett Till. There was Anita Bryant's campaign called Save Our Children, 1977. And then about 7 years after her campaign, I wrote this essay. And I kept thinking that, I keep thinking that, that this essay is going to go, I don't know, out of, not be timely anymore, right? And then there's this turn of the wheel, the turn of the legislative wheel. And it is timely. It's not just timely. It is like it could have been written yesterday. It's so on time, right? So, anyway, I'm going to just read you two more things and then we can have discussion. Let's see. I'm going to read you this. This is also about pronouns. And it's called Husband. Similarly, every so often, besides the right wing of mobilizing itself, every so often the LGBTQ movement organizes itself, and periodically there's a big march. This is from the march in 1993. The man sitting next to me on the grass at the March on Washington asks, "Is he your husband?" as I return from kissing you as you step down from the microphone. On stage, a drag queen in beaded white chiffon is ferociously lip-syncing and tail-switching an answer to the introduction you have given her. Praise from a drag king resplendent in your black-on-black suit. In the audience, I hesitate over my answer. Do I change the pronoun and the designation of husband? Finally, I reply, yes, she is. He hesitates in his turn. He hasn't gone through the operation? The complexity of your history crowds around me as I juggle your female birth sex, male gender expression. I say, she's transgender, not transsexual. Up on stage, Miss Liberty is reading, with sexy histrionics and flourishes of her enormous torch, a proclamation from a woman who is a U.S. senator, a speech that trumpets and drums with the cadences of civil rights. The man blinks his eyelashes flirtatiously, leans toward me, whiskey on his breath, waves his hand at his companions. We're up from North Carolina. Then, femme to femme, he begins to talk to me of your beauty. He is perfect. If I ever wanted a woman, it would be someone just like her. With innuendo and arch look, he gives truthful ambiguity to what he sees in me, in you, something not simply about gay rights. The queen whispers in my ear with his sharp, steaming breath. Don't let her get away. Hang on to him. And this is let's see if I can make it obey this way. Walking back up Depot Street. And this came out in 1999. The Other Side. That was the name of the first gay bar I went to. The Other Side. This is from the middle. The MC jokes, get to be as old as me, have to decide if you're a he or she. Scolds her niece, nephew, her nephew, niece. Which is Mawu? Which Lisa? One clanks keys from a cinched fighter's belt. The other flutters hands and lashes. The unsmiling woman at her elbow asks Beatrice sideways, what kind of woman are you? Stand here. Answer. Rearing proud head, she shies at touch, a hand on her rough starched shirt. Yet her voice leads, low, whispering, answer me and live. Wanting to taste her scarred path, to trace with tongue each danger past. To meet at a forgotten crossroads, a makeshift altar, a pile of stones, plastic roses, red ribbon, a sign with illegible words from a god once there. To kneel and lick her palms, scraped raw, shoved down on stones. To walk on, their feet raising dust in the road. To enter the lean-to house and lie down as night rises, fog billowing like smoke up from the fields. Inside a fire, the bloody shirt stripped off. To lie under her, to become the place both are going, a rhythm like oars in water. The winter begun outside, the snakes asleep, none to lick her ears so she could hear an answer, none waiting to steal her words. On her own about how to answer, she waits for the unknown woman to ascend through smoke, past the grinning bouncer, the vending machine. She waits for her boot clack on the stair, old sound of desire. Beatrice waits for the woman with eyes that say, come with me. Into the rain-streaked street of night, the yellow leaves fallen like golden scars on black asphalt. They walk out their answer to the riddle. The woman who is not a man, the woman who is not a woman, following the yellow drift like fire around the corner. And that really is the riddle. That's actually what's being fought about right now in estates. The people who want to have room to figure out who they are. Are they a man? Are they a woman? Are they somewhere in between? Sometimes they're living somewhere in between until they make up their mind one way or another. But really, really what's being fought about is the fact that nobody makes up their mind. They just go along, and then something happens and they say, oh my God, wow, that's who I am, or that's who I am now, right? That's who I am now, you know, depending on what they've been taught. So really what's being fought over is that space in between that has been closed down. And now, you know, the guys in the legislatures are trying to tighten it up. But of course, if you look at the map of the US, then you see it all right there. There are all the states of the old Confederacy, plus a couple more around the edges that were like, you know, still allowing people to be bought and sold during the war, right? And then a few others here and there, one over here, one over there. But and I don't know what's going to happen. I really don't. I don't know what's going to happen. It's one thing to look back at history and to see what happened in 1830, 1835, 1840, 1845, 1850, 1855, 80. Boom, the guns go off in the harbor in South Carolina, and then there's a war. But there was a lot of fighting before we got to that point, for sure. A lot of fighting and a lot of you know, a lot of fighting over land that wasn't even land that the settler colonialist had the right to bargain with, you know. So we're in a new stage of struggle over the land and over who's going to do the work. And there are new unions rising up, you know, which is good. And the question is, are there going to be enough unions? Are they going to be strong enough? Can they push the powers that be back? How much fighting will there be? How much? I don't know what's going to happen. You know, that's what that's what I'm learning now that Leslie's gone. I used to talk all this stuff over with her, but I can't do that now. I mean, I do, you know, mentally talk it over with her, but I can't actually talk it over with her. So plus I'm 76. So I'm talking it over with you now because you all have your own version of it going on. And I'm really interested in hearing what you think of that. Like there's what's going on in France where they're just trying to save 2 years of their retirement plan. That's all they're trying to do. And, you know, so there's that. And then there's a big nurses strike going on in England where they have a plan, sort of like in Canada. But we're in a we're in a period of retrenchment. We're in a tremendous period of retrenchment, and it's and there's really no telling what the outcome is going to be, unless we get our shit together. Seriously, I mean it. Unless we get it together. And I don't mean just the LGBTQ people, right? Right. Yeah. So so that's it. That's what I've prepared. I don't know where I am on my time. I don't think it matters, because we've got people who've been working on this all day, and
We've got time. There's no hurry. We were just wondering if you were going to read the poems you sent us from Magnified, but we can also start with a discussion.
Yeah, we could start with discussion, and then I'll read maybe one or two of those right at the end. How
That
about
sounds
that?
lovely.
Yeah.
Great. Well,
Yeah.
first of all, thank you so much for reading all of these and for sharing. And yeah, maybe to kick off the discussion while people gather their thoughts, I was wondering what it feels like to kind of revisit all of these texts that you've written like 30, 40 years ago. Like how often do you go back to them, if at all, and what's it like to read them now and in this kind of political environment that we have today?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's really a good question, because I have gone through a lot of ups and downs over the years about the work. I'm trying to be a communist poet. This is a long process, right? But in the early 2000s, right, I joined the party, and I started thinking about my work in a deeper way. And I said, what does it mean to be a communist poet? And I started reading communist poets, and so there's all that. But I've been writing for a long time. I started writing seriously in my mid-30s, which was late for late for a male poet, and not late for a female poet, put it that way. It was just what it was. And I've had a lot of ups and downs around the work. Like, oh, okay, I pushed the border there, and I really need to go back and add something or whatever. But now I see, oh my God, like the years in struggle essay, the identity essay, as I call it, just has an ending, which is like, I'm just trying to figure out a way to be friends with this person who I've been fighting with. This is where we are right now. Exactly. How do you talk to X? You name, there's a whole spectrum of people. Like, how do you talk to them? How do you talk to science deniers? How do you talk to blah, blah, blah? Mm-hmm. There's just, it's complicated. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to figure out.
So there's a whole debate going on about whether you should, if it is helpful to cancel people, or if you should go into discussion and try to reach them.
Well, right. And people are right to be wary. They are, because there's some people who don't want to talk to you, who just want to yell at you. I was at a demonstration with somebody like that. This has been a little while ago, but it was a May 1st demonstration in Buffalo. And there was a guy there in camouflage, and he just came over and he just proceeded to harass our little group of people. And I was like, good God. So I just started talking to him. So he was talking, and I was talking. He was talking, I was talking. We were talking, we were talking, we were talking, we were talking. It's like, what are you going to do with somebody like that? He didn't really want to talk to me. He said he did, but he did not. He did not really want to talk to me. So what the hell? you know, and actually somebody, one of the Buffalo demonstrators, took a great picture of us because he's talking, I'm talking, we're like this, and behind us are these people with these signs like, what the heck is going, you know, people with our signs like, what the hell is going on, you know? Like, what is it? But so there's that situation, but then there are other situations where you know, you think maybe I have a toehold here, there's some way I can have a discussion with them, you know. And then there are lots of other people who are just like, what is trans? See, I think that's, and I think you got a flavor of that from the conversation I had about husband with the guy from North Carolina, you know, because for a while, transsexual was being used about people who had surgery, transsexual. And transgender were people who fit under this sort of big umbrella, you know, like Leslie did. But then that disappeared, and then the operation meant transgender. It didn't mean all people who go against, it didn't mean gender nonconforming. It didn't mean, right, any of that. It just meant people who adjusted their bodies to the either or. Right.
Okay.
Which Leslie had done, but, you know, that wasn't where the conversation was. Right.
So there are others, thank you so much. There are other people who like to talk to you, not just Clara and me. So I think, yeah, Lara, you can start. Thank you, were first.
Hi, Minnie Bruce. I'm Lara from the Spinnboden Lesbian Archive. I'm very pleased to meet you on screen. And yeah, I discovered your work at the university in my beginning 20s. We read yours in Struggle, and I was so amazed. And I also find that also she, he, the, both those books are very actual, also from a German perspective, kind of, because I mean, just like the political situation, not only concerning rights for queer people, yeah, but also in whole, it's also going to the right somehow, or there's like this big movement from the right. So I feel it's very actual. Your texts also for here, or if I read them now, and also for queer people, because we have this very rising movement of trans exclusionary radical feminists also here in Germany, who are internationally organized and try to also on a political level, for example, there should be a new law now that people can change their gender accordingly to how they identify, in a very unbureaucratic way. And actually a lot of radical feminists succeeded now that there's a paper where they can have their concerns about or their transphobic agenda is now also in this paper. So I feel it's very sad for the work for so many of your generation that it's still so actual. But in the same way, when I read it, it's really touching, and also there's a lot of hope also, I guess, from these texts to see okay, there were people for many years who were fighting for the same same rights, because there's also this telling now in the movement that oh, in the 70s we had other stuff to do, or this was not important, or something like that. So I guess there's no question. I just wanted to thank you for your work and tell a little bit about the context here.
Yeah, thank you. I think I just know that this push that you're describing is going on in a lot of different places. And I think that it's very hard to know how much of it is coming from below, right? From people's actual lives, instead of from, like I said, you look at the map of the states and then you see which states are pushing to repress discussion of all of these issues, all of them, critical race, trans, LGBTQ, blah, 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 all of that. Well, that's pretty transparent, I'd say, at the map and what states, and knowing the history of the US, then and then people are trying to figure out like how to deal with that, Oliver?
Right. Clara, did you want to say something first? You unmuted yourself.
I was just going to call on you.
Okay, thank you so much. Hi, Minnie Bruce. I'll join Lara in saying thank you so much for your work and your activism. And it's such a joy to be in your presence and to watch you speak. I actually wanted to ask whether you could talk a little bit about your creative writing process, especially in regards to poetry. I read poetry myself, and I recently read Magnified by you, and I am very much interested in your creative process. So maybe how you start a poem once you've had an inspiration, whether you start with the idea or with a form, or whether that depends, and maybe what your editing process is like, whether you're drawn to certain types of form or certain types of poetic writing. Of course, you can apply this to your other writing as well, but as a poet, I'm also just specifically interested in writing poetry. So if you can speak to any of that, I would very much love to hear.
Mm-hmm. Well, I won't say a lot, but what I will say is just be true to yourself, Oliver, I think is the trick. In other words, I remember when I was first starting to write the poems that are in I don't know, I guess they're in We Say We Love Each Other. And they were very long. They were maps poems. There were 3 of them. And they were really very long and extended lines and, everything. And I read one of these at a reading in National Women's Studies Association conference in Kansas. And I had someone who was in the reading with me say, "Oh, good work, you'll get to the point where you can like edit some of that down." And I just thought, well, I said, I'm just not ready to edit it down. Not where I'm at. That's not what's going on. So, so I think you just trust your own instincts about your own work, like where it's going. And I think the only other thing I want to say is I really do I go outside and I look at what's around me, and I try to use that when I'm writing, the actual physical life, birds, sun, people. You know, like, what is this telling me about what's happening now? What is this telling me about what's happening now? So I would just say, trust yourself. Trust yourself. No one really can tell you how to do this. They really can't. They really can't, you know. It's a real challenge.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for that. Should we continue with Leah?
All right. I can just agree with the others. I wanted to thank you for being here today with us in this Zoom call and sharing your thoughts with us and talking with us. And I wanted to ask you, because you had mentioned the importance of materialism over idealism, and because I feel for the last decades, particularly in mainstream queer activism, that this Marxist philosophy has definitely become less. And if you could elaborate on what materialism, Marxist philosophy, organizing still gives to the transgender struggle and activism.
Well, you know, that is a really good question, because I've never had to actually put it into words, just straightforwardly, you know, like, this is the dividing line. This is the place where if you're a materialist, you're on this side, and if you're an idealist, you're on the other side. And I understand that you know, that people who've lost someone to street violence or to other kinds of violence, and they don't want to think that person is really gone, you know. But it's kind of a far stretch from assuming that there's a actual person who can talk to you, as opposed to thinking that their energy is in the world, but it's broken up into little tiny microbes trying to find where it needs to go. You know, and if you're a materialist, that's really what you think is happening. Really what you think is happening. And it's not a you know, it's not a particularly no, it's not a particularly overjoyous way to look at the world. I mean, it really isn't, because you can't just say, well, I'll just put up with this now because what? I'm going to see the people I love after I die. There are people who believe that, and they are idealists. But it's also a way people just don't mobilize themselves to change things. You know, the South especially. Yeah. So I don't actually really know what to say, except it takes a lot to be a materialist, a lot of determination, a lot of stubbornness. It really does. And a certain amount of just loss, you know. If I had any hope, if I had not hope, but if I had any something that there would be another world, I really, long before Leslie died, I lost that illusion.
Thank you so much. So we have one more question, one more raised hand, and maybe you'd like to read the poems afterwards because people have been asking for them already in the chat.
Okay.
So
All right.
Henry can ask.
Henry?
We can't hear you.
Are we talking to me? Is that
No.
me? I'm wondering about how you feel about the radical lesbian versus trans issue, the idea of wanting to maintain a women's only space. Do you have any insights on this dialogue or this feeling of the radical lesbian versus trans issue?
Well, I have a little bit more understanding, I think. I just got through completing the draft of this next book I'm working on, and what that meant is I had to go back through and reread notes I'd made from different situations, right? And somewhere in there, I reread this note to myself, where I was talking to a friend of mine about the narrowing of political focus around sexual abuse and rape, and the rise of that as a unifying factor. And she pointed out to me, rightfully so, that she was seeing the need emerging in the wider women's movement for an issue like that would I don't know, hold up against the issue of racism that was uniting women of color. So then it becomes white women who are being abused by men, and they are the real women. They're the real women, right?
That's
And,
what,
and then there's women of color who are being subjected to racism. And both groups include people who are trans, but it's a countermeasure. I don't even think it's necessarily a deliberate countermeasure. I think it's just one of those things that emerges, and it's certainly due to a lack of political sophistication on the part of white women around the depth of racism. Yeah. And of course, what I'm discovering from this conversation with you all, and also just in sort of in general, is I'm seeing how the attacks or organizing or whatever you want to call it seem to be more dramatic in France, Germany, England. There's some places where places where there hasn't been as much leadership by women of color in relation to liberation. And that certainly has been the case in the US, certainly. So I don't think it's something that I don't think it's anything that's going to get solved by talking about it. I think it's something that will get solved by people struggling over it. And right.
thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. Thank you for the question.
Okay, we got 2 more questions. Maybe Laura, you go first.
Hi. I guess I have so many questions that I don't really know what to ask. But I wanted to thank you for all your work. I'm actually doing writing on like a dissertation on femme life writing, and looking at the way we understand queer identity and the differences and similarities between different political theories from the 1970s up to queer culture now. But I also, from reading your poetry, was really struck by your stories about parenting and being separated from your children when they were young. And I thought that your description of your relationship with them was really beautiful. And I think a lot about parenting now because I have 2 young children. So I was, and with a trans partner, and just how legally we're both their parents, and it's just how amazing how different that is. I don't really have a question about that though. I just wanted to share that. I'm also really interested in femme identity and aging. I feel like a little bit myself that I'm aging out of youth queer culture as someone who's 40. And then I've talked to people who are about 50 and they say their femme identity isn't really about how they look, it's more spiritual now. There's a lot of emphasis on looking a certain way and performing queerness. And I was wondering if you still feel that being feminine is something integral to your queerness, like where that might lie for you now.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'm 70. This is 23. I'll be 76 in September. 76. And this is another question that changes with age, I think.
Yeah.
It really does. It's like I met Leslie when I was 45. She was 42. So but I would have to say, here's what I would have to say to that. I met Leslie when I was 45 and she was 42. And we recognized each other. You know, that's what happened.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't happen for everybody, and it doesn't necessarily happen for everybody around Butch Film either. You know, like there are different ways that you can recognize the person who's your partner. But I think that when Leslie died, that was like a whole big part of my life that died. And I don't know, you know, I'm not sure I'm going to live long enough to come to a different place. You know, she was such a big person in my life. I don't know. It's a hard question to answer.
Yeah, it might be too hard a question to answer, so really.
Yeah, it's I think it has to do with where I am in my life cycle, literally, you know, like I'm 70. Six, 75. Anyway, I'm really trying to figure out like how much longer do I have to live? Like literally. So it's like lovers. I don't know. I don't know about that. Right now I'm just trying to get my work done. And it seems, you know, this conference has made me aware that the work isn't done yet. So, you know, thank you, Laura. Thank you.
Thank you. Nadine.
Yeah, hi. Good morning, Minnie Bruce. Good morning from the unceded territories, also known as Vancouver. I'm just really glad to be in the room. I have a question, but a little answer for you as well. And also I want to acknowledge that my Nuyorican big sister, Femme, who is the big heart of my intergenerational sense of femme identity and past, present, and futures in the room, Luz Guerra. Can't even tell you just, yeah, how transformational it was meeting her within political space and understanding that we worked very differently from the folks, just on the basis of how to decide consensus and understanding each other and moving from there into sisterhood that has carried me. I'm in what's known as Vancouver, but I actually am doing a PhD on Black and Indigenous relations, but basing it in British Empire to go through archives. So I wanted to answer a little bit of the question around recognizing what's happening in England around union and union organizing work. I mean, the nurses are on strike. The toughest union that I hear people respect are the train drivers, the drivers union. Academia, the unions are a real mess right now. When you hear me say I can't vote because my conscience can't allow me to participate in a kind of corrupted union environment, you got to know it's pretty bad, because as I remind people died for unions, and I never forget that. So that's one thing going on, and I really wanted to hear and acknowledge. I know the person before, two people before, asked about you know, kind of trans rights, etc. And I really appreciate and heard how you answered that question around race. I mean, you know, it's been so clear to me around my sense of alliance with trans folk and my partnership with genderqueer, non-conforming folks, that race and how race, how gender is so deeply raced. You know, these are the places where white children often cannot figure out my gender, you know. So they're like, is that a man or a woman, you know? And it's just always amazing to me, because all the women in my family sound like this. This is not how we know we belong to one another. And so the ways in which race troubles a white sense of gender and gender organizing has meant it's a key part of like trans alliance work, you know what I mean, and sex work. You know, just up the road from here was the Vancouver Lesbian Center, who I was the last person to turn the key when it shut down. And that was the first place in Vancouver where, you know, racialized sex workers and trans sex workers had a place. It wasn't about being you know, a lesbian. It was that the woman of color that was coordinating it absolutely understood that this needed to be a place where the working woman down the stroll, regardless of gender identity, had a safe space. You know what I mean? And it was a white woman that kind of were struggling with that. You know, when the question came up around trans inclusion, it was already happening. And it was white women that weren't in the space that were like tripped up and freaking out, but it was already happening, you know, especially around Indigenous women and their lives. So I just wanted to kind of answer your question in that regard. I'm going back to the UK, and it's just very interesting around union and union solidarity. And the household I live with in the UK is a joint Caribbean Russian household. So there's quite deep conversations around, you know, what is communism, just kind of the history of communism and activism and solidarity, you know, across all kinds of lines, space and time. But my question for you today, and just to say, I had the joy of meeting Leslie in Toronto with my mother, and they had this amazing conversation about passports and gender identity. I mean, my mom was a librarian, working class person, her family with like a postgraduate. And it was just really quite a beautiful conversation, which again, is where, you know, I'm just like how race, class, and gender and non-conformers like meet one another, you know. It just, there's no academic theory that has kind of captured it, you know. The theory just doesn't capture what happens on the street. So my question to you though is, you know, how has the kind of history that people's desire to know about Leslie and your relationship and the loss and the change, like where does that sit with your relationship with other femmes? You know what I mean? Like intergenerationally. I personally am a femme that like is very connected to my sense of sisterhood. It could be coming out of being an only child. It could be coming out of being raised by grandparents that had their daughters have a very strong solidarity with one another as women. And so that's the thing that I look for. I don't look for the ache of our butches disappearing. I look for like femme solidarity and what that means across genders. I just love that Liz is in the room too, because I know we're going to talk about this afterwards and the joy of being in a room with you. So my question would be around, yeah, intergenerational, yeah, solidarity, or just, I hear you say the work, because that's where it's come from me. My political work around this question of reparative justice is more important to me than like who I'm hooking up with. You know, it's a kind of richness, and not that I want to deny that to myself or anyone else. But I'm just really interested in where the work and the work that you're doing is part of conversations you have with other kin spirits, let's put it that way, without necessarily putting the term femme on it, although that, you know, your work has been critical to me and my relationship with others. And I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Nadine. Well, you know, what I'm finding, what I'm hearing from everybody really is the way that your questions are showing me places in my life I haven't gone to. Like I'm not having those conversations with other femmes. I'm not having those conversations. Really not. And maybe I would on down the road, but not right now, you know. I'm just not having them. Or I should say, maybe I'm having them, but the femmes I'm having them with are guy femmes. You know, my neighbors across the way, And that's different. That's a different moment, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you. All good. And I completely hear you. Things transform. And thank you for letting folks know that there's room for lots of other ways in which we're in conversation around, it's the kinship part that matters to me, and wherever that is, it's important and rich, and what I focus on wherever I find it, across many lines. So thank you for that, Minnie Bruce.
Thank you, Nadine. Where are we at?
Yeah, so I was just thinking there don't seem to be any questions right now. So maybe to close, if you want, would you like to read some poems?
I could. I think I would just read a couple. I just wonder if Jara, I see Jara, but I don't know if she has a question or not.
I have several, but please read the poems. So
many more questions we won't.
Yeah,
we won't be able to get through them tonight anyway.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah. I'll just read 2 from this book. This is magnified. Leslie Feinberg. Oh my goodness. All right, so I'm just going to read one from the beginning and one from the end. This is called Blue Moon. This is the second poem in the book. Oh, all right. Thank you, poem. This is the first poem in the book. It's called Oh Death. Someone sang, oh death, oh death, won't you pass me over for another day? Someone said, I dreamed of you last night. I dreamed you were telling me your whole life story. Whole world, welkin, winkle, wrinkle. The loop of time holds us all together. The pile of laundry on the bed, you folding socks one inside the other. We have had this day and now this night. The clothes are put away, and from the bed we see the moon folding light into darkness, not death. And then here we go. The foreword. So this is the next to the last one in the book. How we have to go over and over things. Repeat beaten path. Repeat to bury or uncover. The same story we told to the same person again, again, again. Yet another of these poems about death. Yes, again, survival by repetition, the effort behind the smell of cut grass, the swing back, the push. The crisscross of dying blades, you and me, lying down on the grass after that long, hot march, hand in hand on the cool ground, and then pain, our muscles seized to the bone. We almost can't get up, but we do. Pain and the body's memory, the going on of all the other marches, the forward.
Thank you so much. I read the whole book, but this once again made it very clear to me that poetry has to be read out loud. It's totally different to hear it from you. So thanks so much. I don't know if should we take this as the closing or?
Yeah, I think we're at time and there don't seem to be any questions. And this was a really lovely way to close, I think. There is something in the chat.
There's lots of stuff in the chat,
There's
not lots, but there's a little bit of stuff. Let me just
There's a conversation going on about the new gender law in Spain. So I think that's what people are talking about in the chat.
Yeah, who can see your messages? I thank you. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, gender law. Yes, I see poems. Okay. People haven't heard. All right, good. I should just, then there are like a little string of thank yous. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Is this recorded? I guess I miss it. Yes, Gabe, it is.
Yes, the Spinnboden Lesbian Archive will upload it on their YouTube channel, so everyone who missed the beginning can watch it later. So thank you so much, Minnie Bruce. It was a pleasure to have you, and I hope to see you again sometime. So maybe after you publish the book you have now your first draft of, so maybe at another pleasant time.
Maybe I come over and read it with you all.
Yes.
Fabulous. I also want to say thank you to all the people who've asked questions and contributed. There were such interesting and rich thoughts in that as well. So I've really appreciated that. And thank you, of course, Minnie Bruce, to you again 1,000 times. This was just absolutely lovely. And we're so lucky to have you here tonight.
Thank you for hosting me. It was a really wonderful Q&A. It was a really, truly excellent Q&A questions. So, you know, that was the bonus for me.
Great audience also. So thanks to everyone and have a good night or a good day, depending on your time zone.
A good afternoon. All right.
All right.
We're
Bye.
starting tomorrow. Oh, Minnie Bruce has left already, I think. But for everyone else, we're starting tomorrow at 10:30 with an open space. So if anyone wants to come, share about your project, your reading groups, whatever, come along. And this is Central European time. So 10:30 Central European time. So the middle of the night probably for people in the US. So do come along and share whatever. But also if people from the US want me maybe or us to announce something, you can always email us for people who will be asleep at that time. But everyone else, hopefully see you tomorrow. And thank you for a really lovely day.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.